I'm JC. I'm an environmental studies major at Anza College, and I wanted to inform you and others about what camera trapping is, its uses, and how Anza students are utilizing cameras out in the field for awareness and change. Technology these days is amazing. We have it at our fingertips at all times. We capture our special moments with our phones so that we can look back at them for memories. So everyone knows what selfies are, right? Well, have you heard of wildlife selfies? In the Netflix documentary, Our Planet, there are so many shots that just left me with two questions. How did they get that footage, and is it even real? If you have ever seen it, the answer to that is yes. They are real shots, and some of them have been made possible through camera trapping. Camera traps are a useful, non-invasive monitoring device capable of capturing animals as they pass by. It allows people to see wildlife's natural behavior in ways they otherwise simply could not. Although camera trapping might sound frightening, it doesn't do any harm to any wildlife. The name itself means capture wildlife. National Parks Conservation Association 2021. Camera traps are not the most intricate and sophisticated cameras you might think of. These innovative conservation tools are in fact nothing more than everyday cameras that have infrared sensors that take pictures whenever they sense motion, or anywhere from 1 to a 3-minute video that may or may not include sound. To capture an animal's images, you'll need to be able to place it in a strategic place. Usually, those areas are remote and harder to get to, which makes it the best places because the environment is not disturbed. Because animals have an excellent sense of smell, our scent will linger around the area the camera is for about anywhere from a few days to about a week. And we know this because we won't see any type of, we won't have any footage for anywhere from the day that we set the camera trap to approximately 2 days to about a week or so. So also, depending on the location, it may be very difficult to retrieve the data on a regular basis. The cameras can be out anywhere from a couple of weeks to even months without maintenance, which is great because there's no need for much upkeep. However, depending on the temperature, it can affect the battery's life. So within that time frame, depending on the activity in the area and the capacity of the SD card, there can be a range of pictures, video, and audio anywhere from 15 to a few thousand. Obviously, it's going to depend on your SD card. So there are many uses for camera traps, also known as trail cams. The use of automatic cameras to monitor wildlife activity has increased dramatically globally. Meek, P, and Fleming, P 2014. Why the increase? It's used for a variety of things such as conservation being the most common to art, although that wasn't always the case. So I'm going to show you an actual camera. This is one of our basics. This is the camera itself, and we put this casing over it to protect it from any wildlife, and here's the back part, and we use that to tie it to a tree. You see here are the sensors, and this is where we're able to review the data as well as place the SD card. It's a very simple process. Our national parks and protected areas are a vital habitat for numerous species of wildlife, and the ability to accurately survey and monitor them is important for their survival. National Parks Conservation Association 2021. They capture metadata such as date, time, temperature, and lunar cycle, which is a big factor in wildlife behavior, which is why it's important not to interfere with the area. We must capture images of wildlife with as little human interference as possible. The data is used for a variety of things such as cataloging biodiversity and investigating theoretic and applied ecological issues that impact both environment and wildlife. The data reveals the local ecosystems and also helps us estimate species population, track migrations, of course these are just a few, observing feeding habitats, interspecies relationships, identifying emerging habits, and understanding how humans impact the wildlife around us. And these are just a few. There are many more reasons. On the image itself, the metadata is captured, such as date and time. It's usually at the bottom of the camera. Once you upload the SD card, you'd be able to see that. Sometimes if you're looking at images online, it'll show a long strip at the bottom with numbers or values. Conservation biologists are not the only ones who value the images of camera trapping. It is this dynamic between science and art that the world seem to endure at the value, and creative uses of camera traps are likely to continue to grow as today's camera traps emerge with newer technologies in ways that rapidly change the definition of the term. Meet Pete and Fleming, 2014. Digital wildlife cameras have not always been around. They have been a long way from what today's cameras look like. First camera trap was created by George Shiras III, an American congressman who's widely credited as being the first camera trapper way back in 1890. McConnell J. 2019. The idea was simple. The camera was triggered by a tripwire and a flash unit, like any other tactic in luring animals. The tripwire had bait attached to it below. Like the first cameras, the flash was very loud and strong. First successful pictures that were taken was of a rabbit and 2 deer. This was an art form for George. He never was into conservation, he just did it more for art. Although our camera traps today, we don't use any type of bait because it's automatic. Frank M. Chapman was the first to bring camera trapping into conservation while he was in Panama. While studying animal tracks, he could not distinguish which feline species that track specifically belonged to. So then Frank realized that placing a camera trap near the sighting of the feline tracks using the same techniques as George did would more likely find the answers that he needed. I would have never come to know what camera trapping is until I got to De Anza. Naturally, I loved animals and science, so I thought to pursue an education in environmental science. Julie Phillip, who authored, developed, and taught environmental science and environmental study courses, and created the ES department at De Anza College from 1988 to 2015. Julie proposed the idea that De Anza ES department help in conserving Coyote Valley, including the staff, faculty, students, to help in developing protective highway crossings for wildlife. Reason this is so important is because the 101 divides 2 mountain ranges that provide safe passage for wildlife between Mount Hamilton region and Diablo Range. Scenic America declared Coyote Valley as a last chance landscape in 2001, one of the most endangered landscapes in the United States. Phillips, 2012. Animals need access to both ranges for survival, resources, and reproduction. Without the crossing, it'll create a bottleneck and possible extinction for some wildlife. Here's how De Anza helped out with conservation. Several trips to Coyote Valley to set up camera traps. Weekly meetings with experts in GIS, botany, geology, birding, history, biologists, you get the idea. To observe animal presence or absence, migration, and high-use areas, De Anza Environmental Studies Department had students and faculty strategically place cameras and monitored for over a year so that seasonality can be determined. The study has revealed that more than 20 mammal species has been identified within the study area over the amount of 9,000 events that were captured. Yes, you heard that right, 9,000. This analysis demonstrates that wildlife species are using at least 6 monitored Highway 101 culverts, 2 underpasses, and 1 overpass. Phillips, J. 2012. So what makes camera trapping unique is that these pictures are not only a form of art, but they are scientific data that will scientific data that we'll use to gain critical information about wildlife and their habitats. Our planet wildlife is at crisis, and numbers have fallen by more than half, and species are becoming extinct at alarming rates. When habitats are developed, Wildlife is usually not a priority in many developers' plans, and wildlife suffers for it. With the help of Anza and their camera trapping team, they were able to support scientists in the field of conservation. They were able to use the data they collected to create awareness and to make a change. I hope you take from this a little bit more knowledge about camera trapping and how Anza helped in conservation. Thanks for tuning in. I'm JC.